What if I told you the real reason so many older men quietly stop pursuing relationships has nothing to do with bitterness, a broken heart, or giving up on love altogether? What if the truth behind their silence was actually something far more powerful than any of that? Ashio Euler and abundance. Ian no stand see a standing so deep and so clear that once a man arrives at it, he simply cannot go back to seeing things the way he used to right now. There are thousands of older men doing exactly this, stepping back, going quiet, pulling inward, and the world around them tends to get it completely wrong. People assume they must be wounded. They assume something bad happened, that some woman did them dirty, that they closed themselves off out of pain or pride. But that is not the story. That is almost never the story. The truth is that these men have reached a point in life where everything becomes very, very clear. The kind of clarity you cannot rush, cannot buy, and cannot fake. The kind that only comes from having actually lived. This did not happen overnight for most of them. It was not one bad relationship or one terrible year. It happened the way a season changes in an Angie, so slowly you almost do not notice it until one day you look up and everything is different. Year after year, experience stacked on top of experience, and something inside these men quietly shifted. They started recognizing patterns they had seen before. They started understanding what brought calm into their lives and what quietly destroyed it. They learned that not every person who enters your world deserves to stay. And not every connection is worth bleeding for just to keep it alive. What makes this even more interesting is that most older men never announce this change. They do not post about it. They do not gather people around to explain themselves. They simply become different on the inside. And when someone notices and asks about it, they say something brief and easy. Something like, "I am just enjoying my own company right now." Or, "I am focused on myself these days." And people hear those words and assume it is an excuse or a cover story for loneliness or maybe even a quiet kind of sadness. But behind those simple words is something much larger. These men have reached the point where their inner peace feels too valuable to hand over carelessly. The time they have left feels too precious to spend in places that drain them. And their emotional energy feels too hard won to waste on things that give nothing back. One of the biggest pieces of this puzzle is something most people would never guess. It is not anger. It is not resentment. It is the discovery that life becomes extraordinarily peaceful when the unnecessary noise is gone. When men are young, so much of what drives them is external. They want to be chosen. They want to be wanted. They want to feel like the right woman will complete something that feels empty inside them. They push hard to impress. They bend themselves in directions that do not feel natural. They put their own needs at the very bottom of the list, and they do it willingly because they believe that is what love requires. But something changes as the years go by. An older man no longer measures his worth by how many people find him attractive or how much romantic attention he receives. After decades of living, what he starts to care about most is something far quieter: his own mental and emotional steadiness. This is where a lot of confusion happens, especially for women who encounter these men. They mistake emotional steadiness for coldness. They mistake a man choosing peace for a man who has stopped feeling. But many of these men still genuinely enjoy connection. What they have lost tolerance for is chaos. They have been through enough storms to understand exactly what a turbulent relationship costs. Not just emotionally, but physically, mentally, in sleep, in health, in the quiet moments of the day that used to belong to them. A younger man often mistakes intensity for meaning. He thinks that if something feels electric and complicated and consuming, it must be real love. But an older man has already lived through enough of that electricity to know that it does not reliably lead anywhere good. What he wants now is to wake up without dread. He wants a day that feels like his own. He wants people around him who make life lighter, not heavier. And once a man has tasted that kind of peace for long enough, a question starts to surface that he never thought to ask in his younger years. He begins asking, does this person genuinely improve my life, or does she quietly make it harder? And if he cannot answer that question with an honest, clear yes, he no longer feels any urgency to pursue it. That single shift in how he frames things changes everything. There is also something that many older men carry that they rarely speak about out loud. For years, sometimes decades, many of them gave without stopping. They showed up, they worked, they sacrificed in ways that often went completely unacknowledged. They fixed things, provided things, stayed through hard seasons, kept their mouths shut when they were struggling, and kept going when everything inside them wanted to rest. And somewhere along the way, many of them began to sense that all of that giving was simply expected, not appreciated. Expected, like it was just part of their function, not a reflection of who they were or how much they cared. They began to feel like they were valued for what they could produce, not for who they actually were underneath all of it. Over time, that feeling does not turn into rage for most men. It turns into exhaustion. And there is a very meaningful difference between those two things. A man who is angry wants to fight. A man who is exhausted just wants waste. Many older men reach the resting point quietly, without drama, without explanation. They just stop putting themselves where they do not feel seen. They stop pouring energy into places that never seem to notice the pouring. And from the outside, that can look like coldness or withdrawal. But what it actually is a man who finally decided that his well-being matters as much as anyone else's. People talk a lot about emotional needs, about what it takes to feel valued and understood. And those conversations are necessary and good. But there is a version of that conversation that almost never gets had, and it involves the quiet inner life of older men who spent most of their lives feeling invisible inside their own relationships. Not unloved necessarily, but unseen. There is a very specific kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who need you without ever really knowing you. And when a man carries that for long enough, he gradually becomes very careful about where he puts himself. He becomes selective, not out of arrogance, but out of a kind of self-preservation that took him far too long to develop. Age also brings something else with it, the ability to recognize what is coming before it arrives. An older man has seen enough relationship patterns to read a situation early. He knows what it feels like to be slowly worn down by someone who's always in crisis. He knows the exhaustion of walking on eggshells, of never knowing which version of a person you are going to get on any given day. He knows what it looks like when someone uses emotion as a weapon instead of a bridge. Things that he once dismissed as quirks or justified as passion now register clearly as warning signs. And he no longer has the patience or frankly the interest in staying around to see if things will eventually improve. Not because he has become harsh, but because he has become honest. He knows what certain patterns lead to. He has already lived the ending. This is why so many older men have no interest in drama. It is not a character flaw. It is hard-earned knowledge. They have paid enough to understand what emotional instability costs them in the long run. And rather than ask whether someone excites them, they have learned to ask whether they feel calm around that person. That is the question that actually matters to them now. The moment a relationship starts feeling like a performance, or a test, or a constant negotiation for basic decency, many older men disengage. Not loudly, but completely. There is also a truth about modern dating that weighs on many of them. The landscape has changed significantly from the world they came of age in. Expectations feel lopsided in ways that are hard to ignore. Many older men look around and sense that they are still expected to lead, to plan, to provide, to absorb difficulty without complaint. While the qualities they most value in return, things like loyalty, consistency, and genuine appreciation, feel increasingly rare or conditional. Whether or not that perception is universally accurate matters less than the fact that it is how many of these men genuinely feel. And when a man feels like the terms of connection are fundamentally unfair, at some point he simply stops trying to negotiate. But perhaps the most quietly profound shift of all is this. Many older men discover, often to their own surprise, that they do not actually need a partner in order to feel like their life is whole. This is not something they expected to feel. For most of their lives, they were told by culture, by expectation, by everything around them, that being alone meant something was wrong, that a man without a partner was somehow incomplete. But then they find themselves alone, either by circumstance or by choice. And instead of the emptiness they were told to expect, they find something else entirely. They find space. They find quiet. They find the freedom to move through their days exactly as they want to without justifying any of it to anyone. By this stage of life, most of these men have already built something real. They have worked, provided, endured, learned, and grown. They have developed hobbies they love, friendships that sustain them, routines that bring genuine satisfaction. They wake up and the day belongs to them. They make decisions without anyone contesting them. The simplicity of that is not loneliness. For many of them, it is the closest thing to freedom they have ever known. And once a man falls in love with that freedom, once he realizes that solitude and peace can coexist, that being alone is not the same as being lonely, it becomes very difficult for anyone to convince him to trade it for something lesser. This is why older men can seem so impossibly selective to the people around them. It is not arrogance, it is not indifference. It is that they have finally found something that feels genuinely good, and they are not willing to throw it away for the sake of not being alone. They have lived through enough noise to know what quiet is worth. They have spent enough years chasing things that did not satisfy them to know the difference between what looks appealing and what actually is. And then there is the matter of self-respect. something that grows slowly in many men, often arriving fully only in their later years. An older man has usually developed a clear enough sense of his own value that he no longer needs external confirmation of it. He does not chase people who make him feel invisible. He does not stay in situations where he is taken for granted. He does not rationalize disrespect or pretend that unkindness is something other than what it is. He has worked too long and too hard, built too carefully to invite someone into his life who treats what he has built carelessly. This is especially true when it comes to feeling used. An older man who has spent his life working for stability is acutely sensitive to the feeling that someone values his resources more than they value him. The moment that sense arrives, so does his exit. What all of this amounts to is something very simple, even if it took a lifetime to learn. Older men do not stop caring about women. They stop caring about chaos. They stop caring about one-sided effort. They stop caring about connections that cost everything and return almost nothing. They have arrived through decades of living at a quiet understanding of what actually makes life good. And it is not the presence of any warm body. It is peace. It is respect. It is honesty. It is the feeling of being genuinely known by someone who chooses you on the same terms you choose them. That is the thing they are holding out for. And because they have finally learned to be happy without it, they are no longer afraid to keep waiting until they find it, or to keep living well without it if they never do. That is the truth beneath the quiet. Older men are not closed. They are not cold. They are not giving up. They are just no longer willing to lose themselves in order to feel less alone. They have finally understood, after everything life put them through, that real connection should add to a life, not slowly take it apart. And they are patient enough now, and honest enough now, to wait for the kind that actually